Well, hello, everyone. Happy Thursday. Well, guys, I've got one more stream for the week because I will be heading to AmpFest in Florida tomorrow. So sadly, no happy hour stream, but I'm trying to make up for it with the stream we're going to do today with Frank, better known as Chalkboard Heresy. It's a chat I've been looking forward to for a while. I think you guys are really going to enjoy his perspective. Frank McCormick is a teacher, writer, and historian. He has taught for over 10 years in both public and private educational settings. During the summer of 2021, he decided to publicly speak out against what he saw as an ideological infiltration of woke politics in public education. To get his message out, he created a blog and various social media profiles to connect with other teachers and parents willing to fight back. He has become known under the moniker Chalkboard Heresy because he described his heterodoxical educational views as heretical to the woke educational orthodoxy. In addition to his private work with Chalkboard Heresy, he has recently appointed as a coordinator he did some stuff with FAIR. He did some stuff with FAIR. We'll just say that. And I have to say, he's one of my favorite websites. I just love it. It's so awesome. It's so great. I just love all this symbolism. I think it's awesome. Frank, welcome to the channel. Really happy you're here.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited about this chat today. I've been looking forward to it for a while, as you know. So
Yeah.
I guess, for people who may not know who you are or any of your background, can you just give us a little synopsis about what brought you here today? How did we get here?
Well, I feel it's been a long time coming. I've been
Mhm.
in public education for 10 years, and when I started, I was outspoken. I was challenging. I was pushing back, and I quickly learned that got me in a lot of trouble. And I became increasingly quiet and very discouraged. And you become depressed. You become down. You're like silencing who you are. You're just kind of going along with things because that's what's expected of you. And I did that for a while, and I didn't feel it was good for me. I felt it was, you know, really making it hard to do my job and really making it hard to be excited about education and teaching. I think during the summer of 2020, when there were the George Floyd riots and some actions from my school with the creation of this equity and inclusion department and kind of seeing the political direction they were headed, I became very concerned about what was happening in our schools ideologically and thinking about the long-term consequences of that for our society, thinking about children being indoctrinated into these ideologies in school and what happens when they graduate and become adults. And I was kind of seeing, as these riots were taking place, thinking about the ideology that people had as they are engaging in these acts of destruction, calling for revolution. I said, well, what is going to be the social effect if we continue to see more and more of this ideology going into our schools and kids coming out with it? And so I just kind of got fed up and I just decided to start speaking out because I saw so few teachers in the K to 12 setting, at least, doing so. And that's kind of what brought me here. I just kind of went for it.
So what were some of I find with a lot of people who end up speaking out, there's like an incident that's like your breaking point where it's kind of like it's like, you might see little things here and there and you're like, that's not right, that's not right. That makes me really uncomfortable. But there's like one thing that's like the breaking point. Did you have one of those?
Yeah, I think it was an email that went out from the Department of Equity and Inclusion about Dr. Seuss books and how they were taking them all from the school libraries. They're just going to disappear from classrooms, hand them all in. And I sent an email and said, look, I'm a historian. I said, I think these books have value and I'd like to incorporate it into my classroom. And I even said, let me have them. Let me keep them as a record of history. And I tried to put a positive spin on it. I said, look, if there's problematic images, let's talk about the context in which they rose. Let's use them in historical lessons and get kids talking. And it was made very clear to me that these are not to be used, that they're not going to be handed over to me, that do not discuss this, do not use them. And that for me, it startled me and it frightened me that just with a bureaucratic decision like that, you can just make books disappear. And even, recording the history of them, in the history department was not even allowed. And I think that's when I started to say, yeah, this is not good.
I think that's so interesting because, one of the pushbacks to some of the anti-CRT laws that have been coming up around the country, and certainly we saw it here in New Hampshire, is people were saying, well, these laws infringe on academic freedom, even though the one in New Hampshire and many of the other ones too, they literally say in the bill, like, you can teach anything that's in this bill as long as you're doing it objectively and you're not being an advocate. But they
Sure.
would say they even like fire came out against these. Like we've seen people online, like Chloe Valdary is like against these, like some of the anti-woke intellectuals who like to intellectualize, they come out and these infringe on academic freedom. Well, what do you call saying you can't even teach Dr. Seuss books from a historical context? Like, what is that? That seems to me to be infringing on academic freedom, and that's the result of what we're seeing with the woke nonsense when it gets, practically implemented in schools.
Right. I mean, yeah, there's a certain irony in that. And I saw these laws. I mean, from what I looked at, there was a lot of controversy over them. I didn't think they were particularly controversial. I think they were just kind of delineating a line that, that can't be crossed. And it got spun into this argument that we're trying to prevent history from being taught. Which I thought was very disingenuous. And, it's an example of gaslighting, making people question what they're really fighting against. And well, maybe this is just history. It's not CRT. And, I found an irony, simultaneously. On the one hand, they're saying, well, it's just history. It's just, we're teaching Black history. That's all it is. And then on the other hand, they were telling you, well, we're not teaching it. It's not in schools. So
Right.
which is it?
Well, yeah, I mean, and this is actually a really important point because one of the confusing things for me when I'm here, like, I'm always more focused on how are these ideas being practically implemented in the real world. And, one of the things that we kept hearing over and over again is, well, we need, like, if we implement these laws, we're not going to be teaching people history. I learned about slavery in school. I learned about some of the darker parts of United States history. I learned about different elements of world history in school. I went to school a long time ago. Like I don't understand this argument that history isn't being taught unless we teach it in this very specific way.
Yeah, it's bizarre. And I kind of reflected on similar things. I said, where are we not learning this? Where has slavery not been taught? And aside from some anecdotal examples people gave, well, when I was little, and you can't verify those. I don't think it's true. I think they're being very dishonest and they're being disingenuous about their intentions. When you read the material and the literature and you listen to them, it's very clear what they want to do. It's very clear what their goals are, but they don't want to be straightforward about that. They don't want to be honest, and that's why they're doing so much to keep transparency out of schools. They're very afraid of um, the public finding out, some of the reading materials and some of what they do in classrooms. Because I've seen it, and what a lot of people don't want to hear is that, unfortunately, a lot of this is coming really organically, grassroots up from teachers. It's not just, top down. I mean, it's been formalized and institutionalized now, but this has been going on for a while. And I hear people, they say that to me. They say, well, I get most teachers aren't on board with this. And I said, well, unfortunately they are. A lot of them, majority of them are.
Mhm.
And yeah.
Well, no, let's really dig into that because I think it's worth kind of exploring some of this a little bit more. So, what are some of the things that you've seen in your work as a teacher that you think people need to know about?
So it's usually subtle. It's usually the way teachers are framing content. I kind of go after English teachers a lot. I see into the intrusion of literacy, um, and literature, these kind of racial agendas being kind of implemented in terms of the readings they're doing. I've seen some really, I mean, blatant bad examples. There was one teacher who's no longer with the district. He left, but I mean, he was just fully using his English course as a kind of agenda driven platform. And I had students, reading about whiteness and coming to me and asking me about systemic racism and white privilege and oppression. And he wasn't even teaching it well. I mean, I'll never forget when a kid shows me their project and says, "What do you think?" And they're showing pictures of dogs attacking Black people from the civil rights movement, saying, "Can you believe what's happening today?" I said, "Today? What do you mean today?" And they said, "Well, like the stuff that's going on." I said, "You know when that's from?" And I don't know if he saw it. I don't know if he corrected them, but it just was reflective of what they're being exposed to. And I had noticed over time too, more and more students were coming to me in class and they were using the language of the woke. They were talking about systemic racism and white privilege without really understanding what it was. Um, and I knew something was going on. Where are they getting this from? They're not getting it at home. They're not getting it, really. Most of the kids are not reading the, type of stuff we're reading online. They're getting it from their classrooms and teachers. And I think after the 2016 election too, a lot of teachers made it their imperative to politicize their classrooms and
Mhm.
to have a mission that we need to prevent Trumpism by really making our classes political.
Well, and that was actually gonna be my very next question because you've been teaching for quite a while now. What was the time frame of when you started seeing this stuff creep in?
I'd say really heavily in 2016, right around the time of the election.
Mm.
There was even the teacher who put up kind of posters after the election around the school, like "We the People," and I mean, it was kind of subtle, but you got their message. And I saw more and more teachers deciding to talk about the election and Donald Trump and the significance and race in America right around that time period. And I also think it coincides with a lot of, what's been going on at the college and university level is trickling downwards. I've called it trickle down radicalization, where you have it going from the university level into teacher education programs. And then these new teachers are going in and they're bringing that ideology right into the classroom. And in many cases, they're encouraged to do so. They're told teaching is a political act.
Mm.
This is your job, is liberation and so forth.
One of the things that one of the analogies I use to try to help people understand how big this problem is in higher education, like let me know if you think I'm correct.
Okay.
So almost every single teacher teaching in public schools today went through a teacher education program, a school of education in which the people teaching them how to be teachers were all indoctrinated into critical race theory themselves. And so in order to fix the problem in higher education, it not only involves training an entire new generation of teachers, it involves training an entire new generation of teacher trainers to thoroughly rid us of this problem. Am I wrong when I say that?
No, you're not wrong. I mean, that's absolutely correct. I think this stuff starts at the university level, and you have to look at where our teachers are coming from. Where are they getting this? I mean, many times these are, you look at an English teacher and you say, wait a second, you're not really, knee deep in sociology or in history or in any of these disciplines. And why are you coming into education? Not with, I want to teach kids to read better and fix the literacy gap and so forth, but coming in with these ideological mandates. And I think the education departments have become increasingly bad at this, where they kind of have a mission now. This is their go into the masses. Pedagogy of liberation. Paulo Freire, who is the progenitor of critical pedagogy, is kind of a staple now.
Mhm.
And this is a much bigger problem than people realize, because how do you solve that? It's to use their word, it's systemic, and it's not as easy. I wish, you could pass a bill or pass a law or just FOIA enough schools and you'd have an answer, but this is a much bigger issue.
No, I completely agree. Like how I got into this topic was I started because I'm an organizational psychologist. So I started seeing it in my clients. I would start seeing like people reporting like microaggressions to
Mm.
HR and all this stuff. And people, we used to say that once these kids got out into the real world, they would be set straight because they'd have to, have a job and be able to function. Well, now all these organizations were starting to feed into it. And that was the first problem that I saw because just of my perspective. But when I started looking at the bigger picture, it was like, no, that's not the problem. The public that might reinforce it, and that's not a good situation because now there's no like even in the real world, they're not getting that pushback that they need in order to, become more attached to reality. But like it's the public schools. It is all starting with the public schools. And it's like it's such a monster that without I mean, I think dramatic changes very fast. It is not like we are going into a really, really negative direction. Um, you mentioned critical pedagogy. What is that?
Critical pedagogy. It's hard to kind of define in a sentence, but I guess you could look at it as it's the idea that education should be political, and um, education needs to be framed in the language of, the oppressed and the oppressors. So Paulo Freire kind of postulated that schools are actually kind of tools of the oppressive systems of society. And so what you needed to have happen was you needed to have um, teachers change that by applying a critical lens to pedagogy, to curriculum, to schools, and that you had to, in essence, kind of radicalize students. The ultimate goal being that, to have social transformation through schools. And he was very inspired by, the Cuban model of schooling and Mao's Cultural Revolution. He didn't see those as bad things. He saw those as examples of how schools can be used as a political weapon. And his book has been very influential in shaping educational thought at the university level and teacher education programs. And a lot of ideas we see coming in, into our schools really stem from critical pedagogy.
Did you go through a traditional teacher education program, or did you become a teacher in a different way?
I did. I went through a traditional program. Um, it's funny because, I think back then I bought into it a lot more before I kind of got a hold of myself and said, wait, what is going on? So I have a hard time remembering how explicit it was. I certainly do remember it was there were these topics that came up. I don't think my program, it was as heavy then as it was now. It really depends on the school and the program you go through. I'm definitely seeing it now become much more explicit and much more a part of really their overall philosophy and mission.
Can you tell us about some of the things you've seen that make it much more explicit now?
Yeah, I think in like education programs, they will specific, the resources they use. So a lot of times they'll use Paulo Freire critical pedagogy, culturally relevant teaching or culturally relevant pedagogy. It's pretty much, mandated reading now in these programs. I do remember having to read and go through that, and that's very much influenced by these same ideas. So it's become much more explicit in terms of the material students are required to read and how it's being framed, what their function as a teacher is. I think a lot of teachers are told they are meant to do this. This is a calling. This is a mission, and it kind of has these religious overtones. Go in, kind of preach to the masses, and they'll use the word pedagogy of liberation, liberate students so they can go ahead and liberate society and dismantle these oppressive systems outwards from their schools. And now I'm seeing what I think you've really seen, now with all these DEI departments popping up in school districts, is it's now become formalized. Now it's been bought into by the district, and they've actually created departments that are explicitly ideological in nature and are meant to train staff, teachers in these ways and have it applied to their teaching practices and curriculums.
Mhm, mhm. So why do you think that most people who are going to teacher education programs, why do you think they want to become teachers? And does that differ with how the education schools see their purpose to be? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I that's a good question. I think most people become teachers because they do want to inspire. I mean, there's this natural kind of tendency among fledgling teachers to kind of want to change society. You look at the problems of the world, and many times the problems they identify, they're real problems, but it's how they approach it. And I think education kind of gives them a calling and a purpose, kind of like the priesthood. And so I think many
Mm,
of these candidates that go into teacher education programs, it's a perfect fit. I wanted to go and I wanted to change the world. And now there's this paradigm that really works well for me because it makes me a hero. It makes me a martyr. It makes me have a mission to my life. These children, they're downtrodden, they're oppressed. I have the enlightened knowledge to come in and save them, to help them become radicals, and to liberate society. So it empowers teachers to become kind of these heroes in this social setting. And I think what happens is education is a hard field to work in, and many times you feel like, what am I doing here? Am I just babysitting? The
Mhm.
drudgery of the machine. So, what better kind of ideology than one that gives you this sense of purpose and empowerment? Well, if I wasn't successful teaching kids to read or to write, or if I can't manage my classroom, here's one thing I can do. I can save the world. I can revolutionize society by what I speak to kids about. And it fits well with kids because they're looking for identity and purpose, especially in adolescence. So it all fits very nicely. And Paul Rossi put it really well to me. He said kids see the world in primary colors. So this ideology really makes things digestible. It makes the world kind of easy to compartmentalize and see things in black and white and clear terms of good and bad. And there's a heavy dose of moralism to it.
Yeah, I mean, like, so it strikes me as like, when I was in school, my perception of teachers was that, these were people who might inspire people to grow to love a subject like
Mhm.
history, grow their love of English or math for reasons past my understanding. But whatever, some people like math. It is what it is. And it seems as though that purpose wasn't good enough. Right? You can inspire people to form great loves of subjects, but that's not like as you said, it's not necessarily an exciting thing to do every single day. You might
Right.
every once in a while have one of these students that becomes your star student and you get to mentor them and you have that really amazing relationship, but it's probably just not like that day to day, like you said. And it seems as though this is just a much more exciting thing to be a part of.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I remember when I was, my early 20s and I bought into a lot of this because I didn't know better, didn't have the experience, and it was a sexy idea. Like, wow, I can be this instrument of change, and these students are oppressed, and I'm going to help them fight back against the system and oppression. I mean, sign me up. That sounds what a great purpose to have in life, and it gives you a sense of meaning. And on the days that are tough and the days where you feel like you're not effective, well, I'm doing the work. They always call it the work. They speak in these missionary terms,
Yeah.
and things started to change for me, being in the system, and I started to kind of have an ideological shift. But most people don't have that; they cling to that, and I think it's important to understand that it's a nice you know life raft for teachers when they're feeling down and discouraged.
Mhm.
And
I
yeah,
think it's sad for younger teachers coming into the profession though, because I think back to are you familiar? I'm sure you're familiar with Gabrielle Clark's case out of Nevada, where her son was told that he had to say he was an oppressor in his senior
yeah,
class in order to graduate.
yeah.
So his teacher for that was actually like really young.
Mhm.
Like because there was a slide that came out in that presentation where she said her age and all her different victim virtue points that she got oppression points for, and it was like she was only like 23, 24, 25 years old, something like that. And it strikes me that like someone like her is almost as much of a victim of this entire scenario as any of the students that she might be, teaching this ideology to, because she's never known any differently. Like when the time you hit your mid 20s, that's when the logic part of your brain is fully developed. So
Right.
she may not have even been there yet. And yet she had gone through the education system, gone through teacher education, got herself a teaching job, was now teaching other people this ideology. And it almost seems like I think I want your thoughts on this, but I almost feel just as bad for people like that who have literally never known anything differently, may not even have any idea that there is a different perspective, a different way to look at the world. And I think that that's just a really sad thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and especially when these young teachers come into schools, there's no pushback. They're encouraged. They're celebrated. Welcome aboard. Welcome to the mission, to the fight. And teachers like me, they're going to be quiet. They're not going to challenge this in meetings or in training. So you think you're doing what's right, and everyone in the institution affirms and supports you. Why would you question it?
Mhm.
And to the students, it's exciting too, because now their lives are framed differently and their purpose is framed differently. And all of a sudden, this is they're part of a political act. It's really sad and incredibly problematic.
Yeah. Why is it problematic? Where do you see this going?
So my biggest concern is when you, in essence, radicalize students. These students are eventually going to become voters and adults. Um, I looked at what happened during the summer of 2020 with George Floyd riots, and then we had in Kenosha the Jacob Blake riots, and saw a lot of these people as kind of beholden to these ideologies. I said, no one throwing a Molotov cocktail at cops or at buildings is approaching this from kind of a balanced perspective. They're fully invested. And so I said, okay, well, if these people are fully invested, what happens if more and more of society becomes fully invested? And you have incidents like this, or maybe economic destabilization, or other external circumstances where things become uncertain in society and people become scared and they're looking for enemies. They're looking for people to blame. And you've had generations of students who have been told, you know, there's this is who you blame, that person. Um, those are your enemies. They're the oppressors. They're who you blame. When things get bad, what are they going to do? Who are they going to go after? And that became a real concern to me. I think it's like what happened during Mao's Cultural Revolution. They gave, they started with young people, students. It was a
Yeah.
student led movement, and Mao pointed the finger. Here's who here's who's responsible for your problems in life. And it's not just that. I mean, everything in history that has a bad ending usually starts with blaming one group. This is who is responsible for the conditions of your life. So I saw that and I said, God, where's this going to take us? And I don't think it requires much imagination to see that's not going to take us to a good place.
Mhm.
Um, and when you start them, it was one thing, when it happened at the university level, I said, well, at least these are young adults and they can think for themselves. And, maybe I was naive on that. But when you're starting with children, that's where it really becomes ingrained during those formative years. And it's just so unfair to not even give them a chance to um, see outside of that paradigm.
Yeah, I've recently been exploring. There are so many different things that are going on in the education system, and obviously, critical race theory has gotten most of the press lately. But recently been exploring the wonderful world of social emotional learning,
Hmm.
because I was forced to finally by my friend Deb Philman, and that's terrifying.
Yeah.
What they're doing to those kids so young is terrifying.
Yep. It's a Trojan horse.
Mhm,
And they can insert whatever I mean, that's the thing with education is they oftentimes they shift, the names are shifting, they change the terminology, but it's a lot of times the same ideas and it's repackaged. Um, and I've seen that with social and emotional learning as well. They've started to now say, well, it's about equity, and you start to see it's really devious how they've kind of co-opted these terms and what they implement into them. And for a lot of times, parents, unless someone calls it out, unless someone's done the research and dug into this, who would be against social and emotional learning? Who would be against equity? Who would be against anti-racism? If these things meant what they said they meant, most people probably wouldn't.
mhm.
But there's kind of the catch.
So I'm trying to figure out a way to explain the difference between critical race theory and social emotional learning to like average people who don't have hours a day to look into this stuff like crazy people like you and I do. And so I want to just run by you how I'm thinking about it and get your thoughts and feedback.
Sure.
So, critical race theory, falls under the critical theory banner, right? Which there are lots of different types of critical theory. There's critical race theory, there's critical gender theory, there's queer studies, there's fat studies, there's all these different things are just different brands of critical theory,
Hmm.
right? And whatever is in kind of the middle, that's the tool that they're using at any given moment. So critical race theory, race is in the middle, they're using race as the tool to deliver this broader Marxist ideology to students. They use race, I think, because it's the most effective. But sometimes they'll use gender, sometimes they'll use, queer studies or whatever it happens to be. So social emotional learning, how I'm thinking about that is that it's the thing that is going to destroy the defenses of very young students to make it impossible for them not to assimilate into this groupthink collectivist ideology. And when you bring down their defenses, and you're doing this over the course of years of just like doing this stuff constantly with them from the time that they are 5 years old onward, however early they start it, when you bring down their defenses, you can almost insert anything in there after a while. You can do critical race theory. Like some people have said that social emotional learning is the delivery mechanism for critical race theory. I don't think that's true, because I it's the delivery mechanism for every single bad idea that the left has. So if we just focus on like how it is the delivery mechanism for critical race theory, we are missing out on a whole bunch of other bad ideas that are as equally bad as critical race theory, that are also going to be able to be delivered through social emotional learning. Because again, it's about it's about helping them to see it's about enabling them to see themselves as part of the collective,
Mhm.
rather than as individuals. Am I wrong? Am I way off base?
No, I think that's right. I mean, social and emotional learning, one of the reasons it's hard to define is it's a very hollow term.
Mm-hmm.
And like a lot of things in education, it means whatever you want it to mean. In the field of education, research is often flimsy, and like I said, these ideas, they're what they mean shift over time and really can be whatever you want. So I agree. I think it's a way that they deliver what they want to deliver. One of the facets of social and emotional learning is kind of like community awareness and social responsibility. Well, what does social responsibility mean? I mean, you ask a conservative and you ask someone on the left, they're gonna mean two totally different things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I said, it's a Trojan horse, and depending on who wields it, they can insert whatever they want into it under the banner of, well, we're healthy social and emotional habits. Can be anything. And because it's kind of a innocent sounding word, it actually sounds kind of great. Like, who doesn't want their kid to become socially and emotionally healthier,
Right.
and to learn socially and emotionally? They can use it for whatever they want. Um, and they can insert these lenses. I kind of think of critical race theory. The best way I describe it to people, and how it's applied to students, it's a lens. It's a lens that people put in front of them, and it shapes how they see the world. And a lot of these things are lenses. So you can kind of trade out these different lenses in social and emotional learning to impart whatever you want. And I see this with a lot of stuff in education. I mean, it's so wishy-washy. It's so subjective. The language is so heavily coded. I mean, there's even times I'm sitting in these meetings and thinking, what are they talking? What does this mean? It's like they have their own language that only kind of the initiated understand, and only accessible to them. And I think that's what's frustrating to the public. And then they accuse the public of being crazy. Parents say, well, social, and they're like, oh, you're nuts. You're a conspiracy theorist. And that's kind of why, part of what motivates me is I want to tell parents and the public that, no, you're not crazy.
Yeah.
This is not, you're not imagining things. This is real, and your concerns are valid, and founded on real things that me and some other teachers that have come forward are witnessing, and know about because of the time we've spent researching and studying this.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I want to come back to that in a second, but you just made me think of something else, which is, this idea of like, social responsibility. It sounds like a great idea, right? And it's like when you start, oh my God, it's so nefarious, isn't it? Because it's like
I know.
they insert these terms into the culture, like Trojan horse. I think Trojan horse is the best way to think about it. It's like it seems like a great idea, but what it really is about trying to get people to see themselves as a like part of the larger collective, like putting your individual nature down to like so we can lift up the collective. And I was thinking about like, holy crap, when I did my MBA, I had to learn all about corporate social responsibility and how corporate social responsibility was so great and how businesses had to be stewards of the community. And there's actually a business entity type. It's called a B Corp that is specifically for businesses who are doing good in the world. And you have to meet these standards to be a B Corp. And I was like, holy crap, they integrated this woke crap into my business school, and I had no idea up until right
Wow.
this second.
Yeah.
And that was a long time ago.
I know it's and you're so spot on about the collective element to this. I mean, everything in education now has been defined in collective terms. A
Mhm.
student's behavior is not representative of him as an individual. It's part of this, the behavioral patterns of a group. A teacher is not an individual; they are representative of white culture or white supremacy. Um, Students should not be taught as individuals. They should be taught as members of the group that have their own needs and their own learning styles. I mean, it's just systemic in how far it reaches into everything in education, which is ironic because they talk a lot about this idea of differentiation, individualized learning for different students, but they really mean, well, individualize it for the group. So that's the only way to view people now in schools is by their group identity. Black students, Hispanic students, white students. It's the same with teachers. Um,
What do you think it does to children to be kind of like, because I mean, they're spending more time in school oftentimes than they're spending with their parents, right? What do you think it does to children to be raised in this ideology that they can only see themselves as part of the group?
Yeah, I think it's dangerous. I think it foments kind of this ethnic identitarianism
Mhm.
that is kind of taking the place of a maybe more traditional way of identifying, which was as a citizen of this nation. And look, I'm not saying that civic nationalism is the panacea to all our problems, but if you have a diverse country and you give me ethnic nationalism, where you identify first as a member of an ethnic tribe versus civic nationalism identifying as a member of a civic nation, I'll take the civic nationalism any day. And they're really working to deconstruct that. I mean, I've even, teachers, the Pledge of Allegiance, which I understand why people have certain feelings about that, but their effort to deconstruct that and to defame it and get rid of it is this idea that we don't want students identifying kind of collectively as one people of a nation. We feel it's really important that students identify by their race, by their ethnicity. That's what matters. When I grew up, maybe it was draw your own kind of American flag and how you fit in, and now it's draw your own ethnic cultural flag and how that represents you.
Mhm. So I'd like to get into just some of the like things that you've seen in schools, whether it be with the students or the teachers that are just like particularly like, things you want to make sure that the public knows about. Can we talk about some of maybe the
Yeah,
stories that
sure,
you have?
sure. Oh well, one thing I think parents need to be really aware of is what's called culturally relevant pedagogy.
Mm,
This is coming at schools from so many different angles. It's kind of being sold as a panacea to all the problems that schools are facing, whether it's behavioral and academic, and it has the power to really transform how teachers teach, how the curriculum is shaped. And I've seen this. This is a really big focus of my school district. It's a really big focus of other school districts as they want pedagogy, teaching practices and curriculum to be culturally relevant, which again sounds kind of nice on the surface level. People don't really know what that means. And, what it looks like is it's an increased focus on representation across the curriculum, that each kind of ethnic group has their own compartmentalization of history, and that identity is kind of centered to everything a teacher does, from how they, what, what, what curriculum they choose to how they embrace teaching different groups. Gloria Ladson Billings is kind of the progenitor of culturally relevant pedagogy. And I won't get into, she has a lot of research, which is pretty embarrassing by, kind of scholarly standards. But one of her central ideas is that race and intellectuality, I think she says this almost verbatim, race and intellectuality are inseparably tied, and
mm,
that different racial and ethnic groups have their own unique learning styles. So that teachers are supposed to use those racial learning styles to teach students. And any problem a teacher or a school is having, be it the achievement gap, be it behavioral problems, is because the kids are not being taught in a way that mirrors their culture. And so by teachers doing this, you'll fix those problems, because students don't misbehave because they're teenagers. They misbehave because there's a cultural incongruency. Um, that's a really big problem, because that's, we're already seeing schools struggling to teach students the basic. And when you have teachers now trying these kind of pseudo-scientific theories and practices and strategies, um, based on what some scholars say is how a group learns, you're taking the individuality out of education and you're replacing it with kind of a collective mentality. And we don't even know if these things, work.
Right.
You're trying to teach students how to read. These aren't like I said, the research that they're based upon is very flimsy. It's small, qualitative, interview-based studies that where kids said, "Oh yeah, I liked it more. I learned more in this class." And so, yeah, instead of doing an essay, we're going to teach students to, wrap their essay, or we're going to
Mhm.
replace the classics with things that are more relevant and connecting to them, as if students can't relate to the classics. Now it's all of a sudden, well, if the person writing it doesn't look the same, you know, they assume, well, the kids aren't going to relate to it, which I think is preposterous. Um, that's my big concern. I mean, have you heard of culturally relevant pedagogy?
I've heard of it. I haven't dug into it yet. It's like some of this stuff I feel like I kind of have shell shock where like I'm just getting over the shell shock of like critical race theory and now like we have to learn about 17 other new monstrous like
Right.
things that are going on.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely one of my big concerns. I think it's very, if you read it, if you read the literature, they even state that one of the books I was reading, she says it has ideological mandates embedded in it. It's
Yeah.
about liberation. Um, so it's another one of those things where it can kind of mean whatever you want it to mean, and it's being used to infiltrate a lot of kind of these socially radical ideas. Not to just mention bad teach. Sometimes you question, like, really, we're gonna replace the classics with books that are about gangs because we assume that our students of color are going to relate to that. It's pretty ignorant to me.
Yeah.
And this idea that students have different learning styles, like black students can't learn the same as white students. To me, that sounds racist.
Sounds a little racist. We can all be a little bit racist sometimes, you know?
Right. But this is, yeah, that's a big one I see, which is really problematic. And I think the other thing parents have to do is they have to pay attention to, what individual teachers are doing. That's the difficult part, is that sometimes a lot of this stuff, it doesn't always come down from a central mandate. It's what the teachers are
Right.
choosing to read and highlight and select in their classrooms. And if you don't go through their folder or go into their online classroom, you might not have any idea that they're, reading Abraham Kendi in US history class, um, without any competing kind of,
Right.
interpretation or source.
Well, and this is a point I've been trying to emphasize for people on my channel lately because of course we've seen all these parents speaking out at school board meetings and giving these fiery speeches and now apparently they're going to be labeled as domestic terrorists, but like, I don't think that there's no value in speaking out at school board meetings. I think it's good for people to find their voice. I think it's good for people to stand up for themselves and to say what they think. But at the end of the day, unless you live in Vermont and Connecticut, the school board does not control the curriculum. They have no say over it at all. And
Right.
so, like, the place that people need to go to, and Nicole Solis, who's the mom in Rhode Island that got
Mhm.
sued by the who got sued for asking for information about what her daughter was going to learn. Like, she made a really good point on my channel like a couple months ago where she did FOIA requests demanding to see the emails of the teachers because that was the only way that she could actually see what was going to be taught was through the emails because most states don't have any laws around transparency and making sure the curriculum is published online. A few of them are trying to get them, but they're just not there right now. So teachers can really do whatever they want and there's like no recourse.
Yep, they can. And that's the thing, is you can even have these, officially mandated curriculums, but behind closed doors, there's very little oversight.
Mm.
Unless your principal is in there every day, and they're not, you're lucky if they come in once a semester and just kind of do a brief check. You can do whatever you want. And the kids oftentimes, aren't equipped unless their parents tell them to specifically look out for this. How would you ever know?
Yeah.
You ask your kid, what did you do in school today? Oh, nothing. Because, they're not going to say, oh, well, we learned about some identitarian ideology, which really concerns me. They're going to say nothing, or oh, we just read something dumb. Um, I think FOIA, Nicole Solis is spot on. I think FOIA is a very powerful tool that is being underutilized, and knowing where to target it, getting, lesson plans, getting, individual, that stuff that teachers put into their Google Drives is public record, and you can get it. And they'll be in a lot of trouble if they try and delete it or hide it. I mean, I guess that could happen. Emails is another thing, looking at what are they saying when they, most teachers don't think that their emails will ever be FOIA'd, but um, that's a very powerful tool to find out. And it seems like that is what we have to do, is unfortunately parents kind of have to be the investigators and detectives.
One of the things because I've been thinking about this FOIA thing quite a bit, and it's one of those things that a lot of people don't know how to, like, submit a FOIA request, or
Mhm.
even and then, like, once you do submit it, the school is gonna charge you for whatever information they end up sending you. But, like, one of the things I've been thinking about is, why don't we just do, like a GoFundMe or something? Probably not GoFundMe because they'd probably cancel us, but, like some sort of, like, crowdsource thing where we get people to donate to, like, a pool of money, for parents that are doing these FOIA requests to help them get access to this information. Because I know with Nicole's case, they wanted to charge her thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for this information, and then it came back like all redacted. Did you see that?
Mhm.
They sent
Yeah.
her like it was like all blacked out, so she couldn't see it anyway.
Yeah, that's what I think. I think what would be really effective is, and you have a lot of parents that are concerned about this, but like, I
Mhm.
don't want to put my name on anything. I don't want to speak out. If parents could even start forming like grassroots organizations where they could even collect money locally and say, let's I'm just saying, say you have 50,000 people in your city that are concerned about this, and they each put in, $5 a year. All of a sudden you've got money. You might be able to hire someone, hire an ex-teacher, hire, a staffer that can make it their job to keep these schools accountable. And I hate to say it, but that might be the only way to do it. The other thing I'd like to see is more teachers come forward and start to, I've been FOIAing my own school district and finding out like what exactly do you have on file? What information? And I've been able to kind of, knowing the language and stuff, you want to get someone who knows the language and has some experience with it, so you know exactly what to target, what keywords in the email. But it's definitely a challenge. I think if we can organize and do a better job at kind of, there's money out there. I mean, people may be afraid to put their names out there, but we got to do better at kind of grassroots organizations. And
Totally agree.
I think if, again, starting on you or maybe even the county level, and if you can just get a small organization together and maybe hire a small staff from people that are concerned, willing to put in a little bit each month, you might have people that can really keep the school districts on their toes. And that's been kind of my idea, and that's something I'd like to eventually be able to do. I think you need some teachers, some insiders into it. And maybe it would encourage teachers too on the inside that are like, gosh, I got to get out of this. I don't know what to do, that they can take the battle to another front and have, if we have more organizations that are recruiting ex teachers who might have been canned anyway because they're, not in line with the orthodoxy, you might have a kind of a powerful army of people that know the system inside and out, know what to look for, know what questions to ask. It's labyrinthine, and it's very hard when you're coming at from the outside. I recognize it because so much of the knowledge and the language is esoteric, and there's so many procedures and systems to navigate. Like, where would you start if you're a parent?
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
No, I definitely want to talk to you more about that idea offline, because I've been thinking about this a lot, that there needs to be a lot more coordination just
Hmm.
among like the average people. And there are lots of organizations that do this. No Left Turn in Education, I think, is pretty great. Parents Defending Education, Moms for Liberty, stuff like that. But it's almost like there needs to be an organization that is making sure that all of these groups are like understanding things in the same way, because I think that a lot of these parents right now, like, they're concerned, they're trying to learn, but it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's very complicated. And even I mean, again, like, even for people like you and I that think about this more than the average bear, there's still so much that
Oh,
we don't
sure.
know, and we're never going to be able to. So I think that there needs to be some effort around making sure that people understand what the language means,
Hmm.
and making sure that everyone knows how to do basic things like, what is a FOIA request? How do you do it? Or like maybe some strategies to use, and like, what are the keywords that you look for? What types of things do you request?
Yep.
Like, what do you do with the information when you have it? Just like very basic kind of like grassroots stuff that any of these organizations could frankly, like, I would want to even like create stuff of this, like put it out there for free. Any of these organizations, you can all use this, but can we please just start coordinating amongst ourselves, because we are up against a behemoth that has been doing this for decades, and we are so on the back foot already. And then we have all these organizations that are out there doing their own thing and like saying different things and using different language and all this stuff. And it's like we all need to get on the same page. We are all, at the end of the day, we may not agree on everything, but we're
Mhm.
all on the same team.
Yep.
We're all moving in the same direction. But us running around and doing all these things separately just is not working.
Yeah, and I commend a lot of these parent groups. They're doing the best they can
Oh
with
yeah,
what
totally.
limited information they have. I mean, I really commend them. It's hard, and they're still having trouble breaking in. I'm kind of in talks with Paul Rossi about we're brainstorming is how to actually do this, where we could
Good.
form some type of teacher-led organization where we can, be really effective tools in fighting this. And, part of that is, logistical. We, got to raise money, got to find ways to, how do you, if you're kind of a blacklisted teacher, you're going to have to be able to support yourself. You're going to have to be able to raise money to get these materials out there. But maybe even where you could have kind of a network where, people could start their own grassroots organizations where parents can connect with a teacher. I think it's really important. Find the dissenting teachers and get them. They're your inside people. And maybe they
Mm.
don't want to come out, but they might be able to help you. And if you're able to form kind of a county level organization, maybe you can recruit them. Maybe you can say, look, we're hiring a teacher. This is our operating budget, and we'll hire a teacher or a team of ex teachers who are looking to get out, who are looking to help us out to make this your job and your mission to keep all the schools in the county, um, you know, on watch, and to FOIA and to present it to us and break it down. What does this mean to keep ahead of the research? Because it's so unfair. It's, teachers are, I mean, parents are fighting, you know, with what time they have outside of their regular jobs. They're having to spend, I would say, waste time trying to find out what their kids are learning and what these things mean just because they don't want them to be ideologically indoctrinated. I mean, you shouldn't have to do that if you're a parent. I mean, you should be able to trust your schools and their good judgment, and that teachers aren't going to weaponize education for political purposes.
Yeah,
So,
go ahead, sorry.
no, yeah, I was just gonna say, like, we need to get more teachers on board. We need to
Yeah.
mobilize them, and even if there's a lot of teachers, I get it, they don't wanna come out. Well, if you have a few of us that are leading the charge, work with us through private means, through some type of organization where we can, start getting some of this information disseminated to the public and translated. I say translated because it's so obscure sometimes and hard to know what it means.
No, I love that you're talking with Paul Rossi. Paul Rossi is a good man, and I think that,
Yeah.
it sounds like the two of you are planning something important. And then, hopefully more to come on that. I just want to take this super chat from Randall Fowler. Thank you for the support. I think the elites are doing this because they feel communism is the only way to ensure the survival of our species in the face of climate change and war. Our species does not deserve to survive if communism is the answer. I mean, like what I take from that super chat is like, I think one of the things that I think is the problem with all of this is that a lot of parents, and I agree with you. I think the parents groups are doing an admirable job. They're doing the very best they can. But I think one of the problems is that whether it's critical race theory, social emotional learning, or so like culturally responsive pedagogy or whatever it is, the direction of all of these things is Marxism. That's
Right.
what it is. It's cultural revolution. And I think a lot of people are having like, I know there's a moment for most people who are kind of like in this stuff where they see the bigger picture, where they're able to kind of zoom out for a brief moment and they get the bigger picture. For me,
Yep.
it came last summer, when the BLM riots were happening, when a book came out called In Defense of Looting. And I started reading this book just because I thought it would be funny. It was on NPR, and I was like, okay. And I started reading it, and it hit me because the book is basically saying, well, property rights are racist, so we should get rid of property rights. And that's why looting is okay. And capitalism is racist because, that means that there are people like the oppressor class and all this stuff. And at some point, like 3 chapters into it, I kind of like zoomed out. I was like, okay, they want to turn us into China. I get it now. I understand it. And like every single thing, I think once people have the framing of what the goal of all of this is, then it stops being about like critical race theory specifically or social emotional learning specifically. It's about what is the end goal they want. It's culture revolution. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think this is, a lot of these things, they're the tip of the iceberg. I think this is this paradigm they have is religious in nature. It's much
Yeah.
bigger than that. And it goes right in, like we discussed earlier, their mission as a teacher. All these things, that comment, they're all related. Climate change, the earth is in peril, the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, and racial injustice. And we teachers are the missionaries who are going to radicalize and liberate our students and achieve social change. And they're so naive and they're so ignorant of the Pandora's box they're opening. I mean, it's like, you fools, do you have any idea what you're doing? This isn't, it's fantasy. It's fun to you. You go home and after teaching and at night you're watching Netflix and you think you're a little radical revolutionary, but you have no idea um, what this could look like if things became unstable in this country, maybe even something unrelated. You just have joblessness as a high. You have some type
Oh
of
yeah.
great depression, and you have these radicalized people. Then it's not a game anymore. And and they're not going to, you think if they're going to overlook you because you're a teacher,
You're gonna be the
they
first against the wall, man.
yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter. They're not going to discriminate in really, which person of these classes you can. Well, I'm one of the good guys. I'm one of the revolutionaries. They may not care. If you've grown up hearing all your life that white people are oppressors, um, doesn't really matter, or that men are or whatever.
Mhm.
And very concerning.
It's funny you said climate change. So I want to show you something that just came across my
Sure.
desk today that I'm actually going to do a story about on my Substack. But this is the Department of the Interior Climate Action Plan. And what
Okay.
I want to show you, oh, it's so small on the screen. Hang on, hang on. I'm going to zoom in. Okay, hang on. Maybe not quite that big because then I can't actually see it. Okay. So what is the number 2 thing on this list? The department will prepare for efforts of climate change on its various responsibility, which includes the following themes: advance climate equity. Equity and inequity is mentioned. Tackle inequity and environmental justice. Like it's mentioned all through this. It's everywhere. Like I've gone through and highlighted all the parts that say equity, and like they've got. Let me go down further, because there's a whole thing on it, and we're not going to go into it in depth. But I just want people to see. Where is it?
Oh no.
There it is. Yeah,
There it is.
action item number 2, advanced climate equity. They got a whole equity plan in regards to climate change. And it's like it's the same thing. It's like once you have the understanding that literally everything they're doing in education, out of it, everything you hear on the news, this is about culture revolution, then you start to look at this with a completely different lens. And like education and public education is the tool that they have used to prime everyone to accept all this crap.
Right, right. You know what it reminds? It's like a conspiracy theory. I mean, if you ever
Mhm.
talk to someone who is like an anti-Semite, everything is connected to the Jews for them. You
Oh
ask them,
god, everything.
why were
I have
your
some recent experience with the anti-Semites.
right? Why were your eggs undercooked? Well, it's let
The
me tell
Jews.
you about Zionism and the Jews, and it's the same with this. Anything you ask them, why did a kid forget their pencil? Well, because racial injustice and inequality, and due to climate change, the wood, lumber's more. I mean, it's just like there's no part of life that they don't see through this lens and connect to these other issues. Um, it's just crazy. It's like at some point you just have to say, like, what are you talking about? Life is not that simple. And the fact that you have an answer for everything and it's all connected and it can all be understood through this lens, that should be like a red flag to you. I mean, the only other, ways of viewing the world and systems that do that are like conspiracy theories and religions, which not all religions, but a lot, there are some religions um, that filter everything through the religious lens. And I see this as the same.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
let's talk about that real quick because obviously you call yourself Chalkboard Heresy, which I think is great. Your website has all this like religious symbolism. Like, how do you see this ideology as being similar to a religion?
I think in a few things. First of all, there's the sense of higher purpose and higher calling. Almost all religions have, they place you in the kind of center of the material world as an agent of a higher force and a higher calling. Whether you're a missionary, whether it's in your daily work, you are important and you matter, and it fills that sense of purpose that we all have. I think it does the same in this sense. I think in the way um, the beliefs are structured and how you have these kind of unquestionable tenets that we all must adopt, and they're foundational. You have these belief systems. I think there's an element of martyrdom. I've kind of referred to it sometimes. There's elements of like martyrdom cults in these things where certain people aren't just people who were killed, and things aren't complicated. I mean, there's sometimes where there's police interactions. You're like, wow, that's complicated. I mean, it's not black and white, but to them, it fits in the narrative. This is a martyr for the cause. I think you have, a missionary class. I've often described teachers as being that. They're kind of like the priests, educators who are meant to instruct the masses into this faith and instill the right beliefs in them and call them to their purpose. Um, the only thing that I think sometimes it's missing is maybe a supernatural element, but I'm telling you, I think we're getting closer. And people kind of laugh when I say this. When you see like, the George Floyd murals and people on their knees and kind of reverence, I'm like, we're pretty close to someone coming forward and saying they've had a spiritual experience or that the ghosts of one of
Yeah.
these people talked to them. I mean, it sounds crazy now, but you can totally see that like in 5 or 10 years, people talking about, that the martyrs have spoken to them through some other means or through some, new age spiritualism. Because if I had told you, maybe 10 years ago that everyone would collectively be on their, genuflecting on their knees and putting murals and
Washing the
flower
feet,
washing
they'd
the
what
feet,
yeah.
you would have thought I was crazy. So I think what we're seeing is the emergence of kind of a new religious movement, unlike one we've ever really seen. It's so unique, but I think it definitely has the right elements there.
Well, and I think I think you're completely correct. I think one of the things that's missing is that sort of like god-like figure or even like the head of the church, like the
Mhm.
pope-like figure. But I mean, I don't think that's not it's not necessarily because they don't exist or don't or aren't in the public consciousness yet. I don't
Right.
think like I agree with you. I don't think we're far off from it. And I think that one of the things that I've thought a lot about what because I was never woke. I was
Mhm.
kind of around people. I was a Democrat for 20 years, so I was around a lot of people who were woke. I worked in higher education too, like so higher ed is like obviously super woke, but
Sure.
for some reason I never got sucked into it and I thought a lot about why. I would kind of use some of the words that they were using just to kind of fit in with my friends sometimes, but in the back of my head I was always kind of like, I don't really know about that. That seems a little ridiculous, but if it makes you guys feel better, fine. I don't really care.
Mhm.
Um but I've thought a lot about like what prevented me from getting sucked into it. And I do think it's because I'm a deeply spiritual person. I actually do believe in like the voices in the heads and all
Sure.
that stuff. And people are allowed to believe crazy stuff and all that. And thankfully the voices don't tell me to do anything bad. So that's okay. Um but I think it was because I already had that belief system. I believe in a higher power. I believe that we all have a higher purpose. I believe that there is spiritual order to the world. I
Mhm.
do believe that that faith was the thing that prevented me from getting sucked into this ideology because I see a lot of these people that are in it and it's like they may not like a lot of them are atheists, but even if they're not atheists, they don't have an active spiritual practice for themselves. They don't have a larger belief system. And I feel like it kind of this takes the place of it. So if I have a belief system where I do have I believe we all have a spiritual purpose for being here. I believe I have
Mhm.
a spiritual purpose, you do. I think I know what mine is. Yours is your business. It's none of mine. But like I have that higher sense of purpose that's already there. So if we're talking about them getting their sense of fulfillment in their life purpose through this ideology because they don't have it coming from anywhere else, it seems like they are really replacing they're trying to fill the god-shaped hole for lack of a better term.
Absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely. The retreat of organized religion has left kind of this social vacuum, and regardless of what you think about organized religion in churches.
Hmm.
They had social utility. They kept people organized at community levels, and they had a socialization built in, and they gave people a sense of purpose. And I'd say most of the time, I mean, I think organized religion gets a bad rap, but I think, a lot of that, you have to look at the historical context in which these things occurred. But I think you can also just as easily look at some of the good things, the social cohesion and how it promoted kind of moralism that was ahead of its time. And now that's gone. So what do people have? They have this kind of, empty, vapid faith of politics, and there's kind of an apocalypticism in it with climate change, and there's martyrs and there's modern day prophets. I mean, I think it's reminiscent in some sense of kind of like early Judaism, where you had kind of these
Mm.
different prophets that emerged and had spiritual texts that eventually came into kind of a whole. But I mean, I look at someone like Ibrahim Kendi, who's like he's a spiritual leader. He speaks to people on a spiritual level. He imbues them with purpose. He reframes their lives in ways that are easy to understand. That's why his book was so successful. How to be an anti-racist, how to
Yeah.
be someone in a world where meaning and purpose is lacking. You can be an anti-racist. I'll show you
Mm.
how. Buy my book, subscribe to my teachings. You now have agency and purpose and a higher calling. I think you're absolutely right.
Hmm. Man. Randall sent in another super chat. Thank you, Randall. In New Mexico, our governor is calling our new climate resilience plan the great step forward. You can't make this stuff up. FYI, I work for the state as a forester. Well, at least you do get to live in a beautiful state. New Mexico is beautiful. I hope your governor doesn't destroy it. Um, so what do you think are some of the things that we need to do to solve this giant mess of a problem that we have in front of us?
I think this is what I've been saying from the minute I came out, is that the issue of public education has to be the issue, because every other issue you care about is going to stem from that. When you're
Yeah.
talking about what your children are learning, what they're being indoctrinated into, um, that's where it all starts. Once it's ingrained in children, it's going to be really hard to detach them from that. So I've been really trying, I think any political party that cares about this issue, or any political issues, has to make public education the kind of centerpiece of their concern. Because what is it, you're concerned about, whether it's taxes or whether it's about certain regulations. In the end, what are those things going to matter when you don't have control over your own children, when they're going to be taught this is the truth, and this is, how you should vote, and these are the issues that should matter. Um, Practically, what does that look like? I think, I'm just starting at the basic step, as bringing some light into these kind of dark recesses of public education that deserve to be uncovered. And when people ask for something really practical, I tell them, start with the FOIA. Let's start just getting the
Mm.
information out, and we can start from there. But once, just expose it, let people see it, and we'll come from there.
Hmm. I just had an idea pop into my head. I need to
Sure.
make sure to remember later. But so like, what do you think about school choice?
I'm a big favor of it. I think that the only way to really address this issue, if you're asking me to really think big, is
Hmm.
to completely abolish the entire system. I think because it is centralized, because it is in the hands of so few, and kind of the intelligentsia kind of controls this giant power structure, the only way to break it is quite literally to break the entire system apart and allow people to have autonomy over their children and their money, and make that decision for themselves. And then you can start to see real choices emerge. I'm not talking charter schools. I'm talking real choice, where I wouldn't be opposed to, look, publicly funding education. Okay, so we're going to publicly fund it, and everyone gets a voucher. Let's see what markets can create and offer. And God, what a great thing. I mean, imagine you're a parent of 3 children. You look at how much money goes into public education, sometimes 15 to 20K per student. You imagine for 3 kids, a mother of 3 all of a sudden now has 45 to $60,000. She could stay home and use that to teach her own children. And so, the left is always talking about, kind of like, we need, income supports, and we need ways to support people and families. That, I mean, that money right there, I would really like to see too more parents kind of take control of their own children's education. I'm kind of different. I'm one of the, I don't think education is as mystical and difficult as people think. Or, oh, only the experts can teach. I actually think it's pretty universal to humans, and I think you can learn. I think it's overly formalized. Um, I say go for it.
Well, I think the reality is, and again, this is something I talk about with Deb Philman a lot. Her channel, the reason we learn, is
Sure.
something everyone should subscribe to. She's awesome, but
Yeah.
like like a lot of teachers aren't even teaching now. They aren't even really teaching. They're handing out worksheets and
Right.
talking about feelings, and then telling kids to kind of figure it out on your own. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I read it like all the test scores, like the national like report card is so abysmal in terms of like reading, writing, math. Like people are not even learning these subjects anymore. And I also think we're about to see a real boom for the homeschool industry.
Hmm.
Honestly, if you run a business or think is starting a business that like would support the homeschool community,
Oh
I
yeah.
think that this is probably the best time in history to do that.
Oh, I agree. I think you're right. I think and even what's happening at schools. I mean, one of the reason kids aren't learning as well, we talked about like these kind of traditional subjects and stuff is because there's kind of been an assault on like traditional teaching.
Mhm.
It's white centered, it's white supremacy, a teacher lecturing the classroom and directly explaining ideas is European model. We believe in collective. Everything's group work now. Group work with handouts, and the kids organically learn. And I just, based on the research I've seen and based on my own experiences, I don't see that to be the case. And kids are actually craving a lot of times direct, explicit instruction. They need certain cognitive models mapped out for them. They need to be walked through it. They want to engage and talk with the teacher in kind of Socratic seminars and methods. So
Yeah.
yeah, I agree, and you're right about the homeschool industry. This is a great time to start thinking about how to support those parents, and I think there's gonna be a lot of opportunities for teachers out there that are feeling disaffected and tired of the system to, go out and make a difference just in a different way.
Well, and I think that that's actually a really good point as we kind of start to round out the conversation is like, there are teachers out there who are disaffected that just are not saying it.
Yeah.
Right? And so this is an opportunity for them to kind of like if people got into teaching to have that like that mission-driven purpose of like helping students to learn and awakening their love for different subjects and stuff like that, but you feel like they've been like you've been beaten down by the woke, this is like a perfect time to speak up and find a really receptive pool of parents to what you have to offer. Am I wrong?
You're right, and, I think the biggest barrier most teachers face is when you've been in a system so long that I have sympathy for sometimes I talk about, a lot of the things, the problems I have ideologically with what teachers are doing, but the system really can beat you down. It can really demoralize you. I see teachers struggle with substance abuse, with depression, and they just come in and they are just a lot of teachers are just trying to get through the day, and all they hear is negativity. I think what teachers need to kind of realize is that they're going to have to take some risks because so much of teaching is all about security. It's about income security, it's about job security, it's about routine, it's the same old thing. And I think a lot of this thinking to teachers is scary because it's risky. What am I going to do without, I'm in a job where, it's very difficult to get fired and I always know exactly how much I'm going to get paid and when I'm going to get paid and how long I'm going to be teaching for. And then even my retirement's taken care of. And teachers are going to have to, I'd encourage teachers to start taking some risks and asking themselves, especially if you feel disaffected by the ideology, are you really happy? Are you enjoying your work anymore? And how's it affecting your health too? I mean, I was talking about this with an administrator a few days ago who was talking about, well, another person had a heart attack and, is in their 30s. And you
Yeah.
see this stuff in schools. So in some ways, when you talked earlier about, feeling some sympathy for teachers, I do think maybe we could, and probably myself included, maybe can do a little better, let teachers are on the fence, reaching out to them and empathizing with them a little and kind of recruiting them to our side, saying, if you're not going to get the hardcore woke, the super, indoctrinated, but there are people on the fence. There are people that are disaffected that are going along with it because they feel they have to, that might be receptive to our message and to different ways of approaching things.
I really think that the only way we have any shot of turning this thing around. I once asked James Lindsay, I was like, James, has there ever been like a situation in which a cultural revolution has started in which they were able to turn it back around? Because I figured that if anyone would know, it would probably be him. And he was like, nope. I was like, oh, great. Very reassuring, James. Thank you. Because I was like thinking we can reverse engineer it, like whatever.
Right.
So apparently there's not a lot of hope there. But, I think that really the only way that we have any shot in hell of turning it around is if we wake more people from the left up, quite frankly. Because at least for me, and you can share your opinion on this or not, depending on if you want to. Like, I think the political right is pretty feckless. I think they talk a lot of game, and I think that they don't follow through on that game. And even like the people that they elect to fight for them don't fight for them. And so if we're relying solely on the political right, I think we are not going to get very far. But I think that people that come from the political left, oftentimes, they know how to fight back and they know how to fight for what they want. Like, this is why they control everything. This is how
Hmm.
they were able to do what they did. And so if we can wake more, because I do think a lot of these people, they don't, I think that they just don't know. They don't understand. And I think that they think they're doing what they need to do in order to be a good person, because that's what the news tells them they need to do in order to be a good person. It's what their friends tell them they need to do in order to be a good person. But I
Sure.
think a lot of people just don't understand the bigger picture. And if we can wake more people from the left up, I think we're going to have much more of a fighting chance when they really realize like that they've been fed some. It's hard because they're fed nuggets of truth within a mountain of bullshit. And
Yep.
so we have to help them differentiate, like, no, this is true, but this is wrong. This is very wrong. And you have to see why. What do you think?
Yeah, it's something I actually hadn't really thought about, but as you say that, it makes sense. And I think there's definitely something to that. I mean, one of the things I remember actually one of my first principal said this to me, and it was something that stuck with me. He said, Never question people's intentions,
Mhm.
because people usually they either have good intentions or they think they have good intentions. So if you want to win them over to your side, don't question the hard left or someone who's waffling. Don't question their intentions. Help them to see how that they can fulfill whatever they're trying to fulfill, whether it's their own sense of identity or sense of purpose, or trying to help people in a different way, trying to reframe it. And maybe you're right. Maybe we can win some of these people back, or at least enough of them to where we can be a little bit more effective politically.
I mean, I don't really think it takes a large percentage of people in order to be effective politically. It just takes like people who want to be active. In organizational psychology, so there's this idea that at least 33%, I think, of people in any organization generally have a positive, optimistic attitude. But they generally don't control the conversation, because the people who control the conversation are the smaller percentage that have really negative attitudes about what's going on. The
Mhm.
problem is they're the ones speaking up all the time. So they're the ones that stand up in the staff meeting and they complain about everything that's wrong in the world. They're the first people to shoot down a project idea or something like that. The people who generally have an optimistic attitude aren't the ones speaking up.
Right.
And so the problem is not that the majority have a bad attitude. It's that the people who have the good attitude are not contributing to the conversation. And so if we can get the people who have what we think are the better ideas to start speaking up and contributing to the conversation, we can have a smaller percentage, but we would actually control the narrative.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I definitely agree is that it might just take a small percentage to become better at doing these things than they're currently done. I mean, there's a lot of organizations and movements out there on the right and the libertarian, and they just don't seem to get a lot of traction. They don't raise the same amounts of money. They don't excite people. They don't energize people. I think a little marketing sometimes would help some of these things too. You have to get people excited and rally people up. It's just a reality of kind of our world, and I would definitely like to see more of that. I think with teachers too, there we're going to need some more people to come out. I mean, I get it. Like there's
Mhm.
sometimes, I mean, there's nights where I'm like, What was I thinking? Like, what am I doing? Like, I'll admit sometimes you're like, gosh, is it too late to just crawl back under a hole and just, but at the, you have, what choice do I have? I mean, if you believe
Yeah.
that these things are as big of a problem as I believe, if you kind of see a dark vision of the future, you can try and be quiet for as long as you can, or you can just go for it. And I think we need some more energy and we need people to take just a little bit more risks. I mean, even on the right, there are some people are so afraid to take any amount of risk. And maybe that's by their nature, but like it's a chain. There's a kind of a chain reaction that occurs. Sometimes it just takes a small number of people to get out there and do things, and you might have a bigger effect. And I'll say to other teachers that are watching this too, you'd be surprised. I mean, so far my district is ignoring me. That was my strategy. I said, I'm going to come out big and go bold on this. And I think sometimes they're not expecting that. They're expecting small, quiet dissent that they can control and manipulate and get you to resign or
Oh yeah.
scare you. And you just come out full force and they're like, okay, now what?
It's so true though. It's so true. Like I don't really do debates all that often, but anytime I have done a debate where I'm debating against like a critical race theorist or something, I
Mhm.
come out extremely strong. I nail them between the eyes. I did this in a debate on Gothic's channel like several months ago where I just like really came out strong and I was basically like, I don't really care what you guys have to say. Here's what I care about. Here are the only things I'm going to respond to. Here's my position on things, like whatever, say whatever you want. I don't really care. I stumbled them so bad they could not define critical race theory for 90 full minutes. So
That's great.
you're right. They like if you hit them between the eyes, they really don't know what to do.
Right, and learning to not take their bait too. I mean, when they call you a white supremacist, I say, "Oh,
Yeah.
okay, I'm gonna go with it. Then you're calling me a white supremacist. Let's move to the actual substance." They're so used to people backpedaling and then spending 30 minutes explaining why they're not a white supremacist, and so we need more of that kind of boldness. And the left is really good with being bold. They're good at marketing their ideas to be sexy to young people and to be exciting and powerful. And unfortunately, the right just really struggles with it. And then some of the worst examples are just like where it's just boring. You're like, look, I get it's a serious topic, but you still have to, as a teacher, you still have to engage people. You still have to get people excited about it. And so you might have to think about your marketing and your approach a little bit to do that because that's just a reality. It's the seriousness of the topic sometimes is unfortunately is not enough for most people outside of, a small minority.
Exactly. Well, we have a great question from Rachel that I actually think you'll really appreciate. For the anti-woke who have considered becoming teachers, either K through 12 or college level, would you advise going for it or staying far away from it at this point?
Oh man, this is such a hard one because I don't want to be a voice of negativity on this, and I don't I do want anti woke people in schools. I would say you're going to have to ask yourself, what are you going to do when you get into that situation? Are you willing to sacrifice the possibility of your career? Are you willing to be silent? Are you willing, those are going to be kind of your options. You're going to kind of have to face a choice. Do I be silent? Do I go along with it? Or do I speak out? If you're okay with those risks, and there are many other things you can do with a teaching degree outside of teaching. And we talked about some of the creative ideas. Then I say go for it. If you can't see yourself dealing with that, if that's not who you are, I would say think carefully about it. And some people may say to themselves like, "Hey, I can be quiet. I can keep it under wraps." There's a cost on your soul
Yeah.
and your emotional state doing that and playing along with things. You will not have a happy career. You will not enjoy going to work. You won't be effective. So I think those are questions that people need to ask themselves. I say, hey, if they're willing to come into the fight and to maybe at first they have to be a little quiet, get tenure and then really push back, then I say go for it.
Yeah, I think that last point is, such a really great point. It will eat at you and you
Mhm.
won't like once you it's one of those things that like once you see it, you
Yep.
cannot unsee it. And then it just starts getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And it's like it becomes more painful to stay silent than it is to speak out in the first place. George Andre Veloso Nunez, thank you for the super chat. Yeah, the debate was great. You got them running in circles, backtracking in their words. It was golden. It's one of my finest moments, I must say.
Awesome.
Frank, do you have any regrets about speaking out?
You know, I and yes and no. I mean, in some ways, the only regrets I have, I think, are times when I'm getting kind of personal here, but times when I
Mhm.
question myself. What am I going to do outside of teaching? Do I
Yeah.
have what it takes? Because I've been in the system for so long. There's just you get naturally insecure. You that's all you know. But at the end of the day, when I think about it, when I think about what's at stake, when I have teachers reaching out to me, when I have people that support me, that really is important. And it really does help sometimes get me through that. Sometimes I'll be having a time where I'm really like, oh gosh, what did I do? I've got a family, yeah, there's always ways to make money. I can Uber and stuff if I have to, but you kind of worry like, what am I doing? And when you get those messages sometimes, they really can make a difference because you're like, wow, I'm impacting someone. Someone else is coming to this fight because of me. Someone else, sees another teacher sees they're not alone. And so that makes it worth it. And I would say if you see teachers like me out there, support them. It can be, give them a follow, send them a message, let them know that you got their back and that what they're doing is important, because there's very little validation in teaching these days, and there's very little positivity that you get. So that can make a big difference. That's my thoughts.
No, I agree, and I totally concur that, like, if you see teachers like Frank or anyone that's speaking out, please support them, guys, in any way that you can. I have put Frank's information below, his Twitter, his Facebook, his website, so please make sure you follow him, give him lots of support. I mean, I think that it's the support. The support really makes the difference. I know, like, there are days that I get so much hate and so much nonsense in my feed, and it's just like that one DM from that one
Mhm.
person that says, like, thank you, you really made a difference for me today. It really does make the difference, and it's the thing that keeps me going, and I'm sure it's the same for you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like those little things that just can really make a big difference and can make you feel just a little bit better about what you're doing. And knowing that, look, I may be the most unpopular person at school in my district, but there are people that support me and that have my back, and that's what we're a lot of times just we're looking for. And then you get some confidence. You're like, I can handle this, and I'm smart. I can do other things. I'll survive, and maybe I'll make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I wasn't sure if my dogs made the microphone, but apparently they did. I don't know what was going on downstairs, but I bet there's like a package, a delivery or something. So I'm gonna have to go look into what just happened. But Frank, thank you so much for joining me today. Is there anything else you want people to know before we conclude?
Thanks. No, I would just say, to everyone, keep support the few of us in K to 12 education that are speaking out, and we thank you for your support, and it means a lot. And my DMs are open, so if you have any questions, or if you're a teacher and you need guidance or support, I try and respond to every single one of them. And we're all in this fight together, and I think that's the key to remember. You can do it. If I can do it, I don't think I'm exceptionally brave. I just think I just bit the bullet and did it, and I think other people can too.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Well, thank you so much for coming again. I hope to have you on again in the future.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I'm scheming on my head right now about, like, doing a whole series of panels with people about, like, how do we fix this problem? I
Right.
definitely
Oh,
wanna have you back in the future.
great.
It looks like we have one final super chat from Tanner. Thank you for the support. I have no idea what this man's story is, but I just want to say I'm 100% on his side. The woke agenda is destroying everything that is wonderful in this world. God bless this man. Absolutely.
Thank you.
And God bless all of you guys that are supporting the good work that people like Frank do. We all really appreciate it. That's all we have for today, guys. Again, I will not be doing happy hour tomorrow because I am going to be on a plane or probably in Florida by that time. But I'm gonna probably be taking a nap because I have a 6 a.m. flight tomorrow, which no one likes. But I will see you guys next week. I'll be posting some content in the meantime. Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you soon.
Hi, guys.